1942. The Allied position in the Middle East is collapsing. For weeks, German General Erwin Rommel, a man so feared and so respected that even his enemies called him the Desert Fox, has been tearing through British defenses in North Africa almost unopposed. His panzers smash through Allied lines again and again. Tobruk, a fortress the British swore would never fall, falls anyway, along with 35,000 Allied prisoners. The British Eighth Army doesn't just retreat, it breaks. Soldiers stream backward across hundreds of miles of desert in what troops bitterly nickname the Ghazala Gallop, a chaotic, demoralized flight deeper and deeper into Egypt, with Rommel's forces right behind them. In Cairo, panic sets in. British officials begin burning classified documents in the streets, certain the city itself is about to fall. Locals call it Ash Wednesday. The sky thick with the smoke of burning paperwork, as an entire colonial administration prepares to evacuate. The Suez Canal, Britain's lifeline to India, to oil, to the entire war in the East, sits almost undefended, just miles from a German army that hasn't been stopped in over a year. Some British commanders had already begun quietly drawing up contingency plans to abandon Egypt entirely and fall back toward Palestine, a retreat that, if it happened, could have handed the Middle East and its oil fields to the Axis at one of the most dangerous moments of the entire war. At this exact moment, with defeat feeling not just possible but likely, one man makes a decision that would save the Middle East for the Allies. His name was General Sir Claude Auchinleck, and you have almost certainly never heard of him. Auchinleck did something bold, something few commanders in his position would have dared. He didn't wait for reinforcements that might never arrive. He didn't retreat further into Egypt, trading space for time the way so many exhausted armies do. He took personal command of the battered Eighth Army himself, right there on the front line, and made a decision that would define the entire North African campaign. He chose a single, narrow strip of desert to make his stand, a place called El Alamein. It looked like nothing. It would decide everything. El Alamein wasn't chosen by accident. Auchinleck studied the map of Egypt with the eye of a man who understood exactly what had made Rommel unstoppable for the past year: mobility. Rommel's genius wasn't just raw force, it was his ability to flank, to swing his panzers wide around fixed defensive lines and attack from the side or rear, exactly where Allied forces were weakest. Every previous British defensive line in the desert had shared the same fatal flaw. There was always open desert on the southern flank, endless space for Rommel's tanks to sweep around and strike from behind. El Alamein was different. It was a narrow 40-mile gap, pinned between two natural barriers no army could cross: the Mediterranean Sea to the north and the vast, treacherous salt marshes of the Qattara Depression to the south. Terrain so soft and unstable it could swallow tanks and vehicles whole. For the first time in the entire North African campaign, Rommel would have nowhere to flank, no wide-open desert to exploit, no clever maneuver around the edge of the line. He would have to attack head-on into a fully prepared defensive position against an enemy that had finally found ground it could actually hold. Auchinleck dug in. He reorganized his shattered, demoralized forces. He rebuilt the fighting spirit of an army that had spent weeks in retreat, and he prepared to meet the most feared commander of the war on ground of his own choosing. In July 1942, Rommel attacked, and for the first time since the Desert War began, he was stopped completely. The First Battle of El Alamein raged for weeks, brutal, grinding, exhausting fighting that ground Rommel's advance to a halt entirely. The Desert Fox, who had never been stopped, was stopped here, on a stretch of desert most people couldn't find on a map. It was, by almost any military standard, one of the most important defensive victories of the entire war. It saved Egypt. It saved the Suez Canal. It saved the Middle East for the Allies, at the exact moment it looked like everything was about to fall apart. Auchinleck had done it. But back in London, Winston Churchill wasn't looking at a victory. He was looking at a stalemate. And he was losing patience. The man who stopped the unstoppable was about to lose everything anyway. Churchill wanted a decisive, crushing victory, not a hard-fought defensive stand that merely stopped disaster. He wanted headlines, momentum, a story he could tell the British public and the world. Auchinleck, methodical and cautious after the exhausting fighting at First Alamein, wanted time to properly rebuild his forces before launching a major offensive. Churchill wasn't willing to wait. In August 1942, Auchinleck was relieved of command. In his place, Churchill appointed a new commander for the Eighth Army, an ambitious, media-savvy general named Bernard Montgomery. And here is the detail that history conveniently leaves out. Montgomery didn't inherit a crisis. He inherited a gift. He inherited the secure, unbreakable defensive line at El Alamein that Auchinleck had already chosen and already held. He inherited detailed battle plans and intelligence assessments Auchinleck's staff had already prepared. And critically, he inherited a massive influx of new American Sherman tanks and equipment that had already been promised and were already arriving. Material Auchinleck himself had spent months requesting. In October 1942, Montgomery launched the Second Battle of El Alamein and won a genuinely decisive, historic victory that turned the tide of the entire North African campaign, sending Rommel's forces into a long retreat that would eventually end the Axis presence in Africa altogether. It was a real, important victory. Montgomery deserved credit for how he executed it. But Montgomery didn't just accept credit for the battle he won. Over the following decades, in interviews, in his memoirs, in a career built as much on self-promotion as on genuine military skill, Montgomery worked tirelessly to claim sole credit for El Alamein, the whole story, not just his half of it. He minimized Auchinleck's role. He rewrote the narrative until, in the popular imagination, Monty became the man who stopped Rommel in the desert. Auchinleck knew what had actually happened. His officers knew. Serious military historians, studying the record decades later, knew. But Auchinleck was a quiet, deeply modest soldier, and he made a choice that, in its own way, cost him his place in history, almost as much as Montgomery's self-promotion did. He refused to fight back in public. He wouldn't attack Montgomery in the press. He wouldn't campaign for recognition. He wouldn't correct the record loudly enough for it to matter to the general public, even as his own contribution was slowly written out of the story entirely. Instead, Auchinleck went on to serve out one of the most difficult, thankless assignments any officer of his generation faced, overseeing the painful, chaotic partition of British India's military forces in 1947, as one army was divided into two nations amid tremendous human suffering. He retired quietly afterward, eventually settling in Morocco, largely away from the spotlight, while the man he had set up for victory became one of the most famous generals in British history. History remembers Montgomery. Very few remember that the ground Montgomery won his famous victory on, the plan, the position, the tanks, the entire foundation of that triumph, had already been built by someone else. In the decades since, some military historians have tried to correct the record, pointing out, carefully and repeatedly, that First Alamein and Second Alamein were really two chapters of the same story, and that Auchinleck's chapter was arguably the harder one to write, fought with exhausted troops and no guarantee of reinforcement, against an enemy at the absolute height of his momentum. But correcting a popular narrative decades after it's already been set in stone is a slow, uphill fight. And it's one Auchinleck himself never chose to join. Someone who stopped the unstoppable desert fox when defeat seemed certain, and then let his rival walk away with the glory, without ever raising his voice to say otherwise. Sometimes history isn't written by the man who won the battle. It's written by the man who was better at telling the story. Claude Auchinleck didn't need the credit to know what he'd done. But maybe it's time the rest of us knew too. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, there are more incredible true stories waiting on History Reborn. New cinematic documentaries every week. Subscribe so you never miss the untold stories that shaped our world.